You're listening to WorkWire, sponsored by Career Club and SHRM. Career Club has a range of services aimed at job seekers with an empathetic approach. Whether you are a job seeker yourself, know someone who is in job search, or an HR professional looking to bring a more empathetic approach to transitioning employees, check out career.club. If you are an HR professional seeking to enhance your skills, subscribe to SHRM and explore their extensive resources. Visit shrm.org. That's shrm.org.
Hey everybody, this is Bob Goodwin and welcome to another episode of The WorkWire. I am joined by my good friend, the President and CEO of SHRM, Johnny C. Taylor Jr. Johnny, how are you?
Great to see you. I'm doing well.
No, it's been a long week and I'm glad that we can get some little bit of time on your calendar, so thank you. I hope you've got your big boy pants on today. We are going to talk about something a little controversial on today's episode, and that is executive compensation.
All right.
Ready?
I'm ready for it.
All right, well, buckle up. So, as always, let me go ahead and just set a little bit of the context for folks and what we're going to talk about. There was a recent article. It was based on an AFL-CIO survey on executive compensation. Recently came out for 2022. And there's a few highlights in it. One of them, and kind of their lead headline, was that CEO compensation is now 272 times the average wage of non-CEOs. So, and it's the highest that it's been. So what that says is CEOs made 272 times more than their workers in 2022, earning nearly $17 million on average. It was the second highest level of CEO pay in history. Stock market was down a little bit last year. That brought it down a little bit. And then they went on to make the point that U.S. workers' real hourly wages fell in 2022 for the second year in a row by minus 1.6 after adjusting for inflation. So it seems like it's getting a little unfair. I want to just read, because I double-clicked on CEO Comp where they were showing it by company, and just to put a couple out there, and then we'll let you go. So I looked at the stack rank the top CEOs by compensation for 2022. And I was curious, of those top CEOs, how many of those companies also had layoffs? And so what we saw was Alphabet. Yep. So CEO made $225 million. At Peloton, which I was really surprised that the CEO of Peloton, because they've not had a good time, $168 million he made with layoffs. Oracle, Safra Catz, made $138 million. And even Apple, Tim Cook, I can't believe he's number 11 on the list, at a mere $99 million. And then, of course, Apple also had layoffs. So there seems to be kind of this dichotomy, Johnny, like it's really a high multiple relative to their workers, and they're even letting people go. What say you?
Oh, man, this is so many ways to approach this. First of all, the headline is obviously intended to do just that. It is to shock you. But a couple of responses. One, and I think you know this, and you and I have talked about this. When a CEO makes $99 million, they are not being paid $99 million. When these numbers are reported, what it is a combination of short-term, so cash first. What do you get every 2 weeks? A lot of times these CEOs are making $900,000, $750,000, $1 million. Their salary is not $99 million. They're being given equity. And it's a pure accounting thing. The way that they have to report these numbers is, I'm going to give you, $30 million worth of stock. By the way, you have to be here 5 years from now. So it's time associated with realizing that money. And it has to perform. So if the stock does not perform, you don't make money. But the headlines that day is when they give person X, let's call CEO X because I want to call out a particular company, their cash is like $1 million, $1.5 million on the high end. In fact, I've talked about Rosalind Brewer, who was once the CEO, the most recent CEO of Walgreens. They reported her with this $25, $30 million package. In fact, her salary was $1.5 million, and she gets a bonus depending upon how she's performing. So base salary, short term, and then there's this long-term equity payment, which is what everyone advertises. That's not real cash. So number one is, and the newspapers and the media decide not to describe that.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, and this is kind of where we are an interesting lot, the CEO of a major company who's responsible for hundreds of thousands of jobs in many instances, at Walmart, as
Mm-hmm.
many as millions of people. You keep those people working, and then people scrutinize your salary. That same person who's scrutinizing your salary will go watch Beyonce perform for $10 million for a 45-minute show, or watch LeBron James get a $100 million contract, or a baseball player make a $150 million contract, and no one talks about the disparity between what that person makes and what the ticket taker makes at that same sports venue.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting. We're
Well,
selective
I
about the
actually,
out.
John, I want to pick up on that because I'm even trying to figure out, is this a contrived metric? Like, does the metric even hold water?
Well,
Right.
Well, yeah, that's why I started with, right? Let's start with, don't talk about the value of dollars that aren't even realized when you talk about equity. So that's contrived. But where were you going in addition to that?
Just that I think that you're talking about one person at the company, the CEO,
Right.
relative to everybody else at the company. So you've kind of taken the most polar way that you can look at this. One
Right.
person over everybody else. Well, it's going to be highly distorted just by its very nature. So to your point, it's good clickbait from a headline,
Right.
but there does, you know, it does really beg the question at some level, though, is why aren't regular rank and file workers' wages keeping pace with? Why are they not participating at some level, or are they, with the equity that's driving the CEO's comp?
Well, I want to get to that. So first is just breaking down. What I intended to do was break down short-term, long-term compensation and
Yeah,
equity. And equity could be a whole bunch or not. That's number one. Secondly, you can't help but point out the hypocrisy when the outrage over what a CEO makes who works all year, every day, 20 hours a week, a night, I can tell you, a day, and somehow that's a bad thing, and not factoring in that that person actually provides livings for hundreds of thousands, if not millions,
fair
of their
point.
employees. That's that. The third thing, and I think it's something that we have to, it's a part of where you're going on this. There's one CEO, that person in any company, and he or she has a very, very short tenure. We're seeing CEO tenure down at 3.5, 4 years on average. So
Mm.
the reality is they're paid well for as long as they have the job. And then they are summarily fired often. So it's one of those things where, just like with athletes, you got to make the money while you're in the seat, because you're one day away from not making that money anymore. And so
Yep.
that's another factor here. You and I have talked about it. I know you're going to elaborate, so I don't want to take your steal on this, but
No, no,
the
no.
thunder on this. It is, no, it's a fair point that there's one CEO and there are 100,000 employees. Just do the math. There's no way we could pay the employees comparable ratios to what the CEO makes, because that's one position versus 50,000.
Right.
You talked about that. Tell me because you said
But,
it
but,
far better
but,
than
but,
I.
but no, no. Well, first of all, I appreciate you kind of reemphasizing, making sure we double click a little bit on, yeah, but let's understand this person's job and the value that
Right.
they create. Having said that, what I'm saying is that, you know, why in 2022 is it 272 times their average worker versus, 10 years ago when it might have been 170 times the average worker? Why isn't at least the ratio staying in balance even as wages go up?
I'm going to go back to my point. If you could do the same thing for, and I hate to use this, but I think it's helpful. No one is saying that a performer who used to charge $1 million a show, who now gets $6 million a show, no one's complaining about what the price of. They might complain about it, but they still buy those
They're still
tickets.
going.
Right? They're still going. And you and I've talked about it. My daughter was at Beyonce, and then she was at Taylor Swift. And I know what I paid 5 years ago for a concert, and I know what I pay
Yep,
now.
that's fair
Shame
point.
on me
Yep,
for it, right? But the fact of the
yep,
matter is, the market is what the market will bear. So the CEO is saying, this is given
yeah.
the the requirements of this job, this is what it's going to take for me to do it. And only a few people in the country, there are 500 in the Fortune 500 people, can do these jobs at the levels that we need them done. And many of them are being turned over significantly because they're not working out, right? That's just the reality. I wish I could debate with people like, should Johnny Taylor's salary go up relatively at the same rate as my employees? But at some point, what I do is unique enough. The value that I add is significant enough where I'm paid for that. And I have the ability to negotiate, being the one person or one of a few who can do what I do. Again, I keep saying this, I know it's like a broken record, but I don't understand why we accept that in every other context except when it comes to CEOs who perform at superstar levels.
No, it's a fair point. I certainly am not trying to pick on Johnny Taylor in particular, but
No. I'm not, and I'm using it because clearly I don't make
I know.
50 million.
But but maybe more broadly, it does sort of feed into a class warfare narrative that there's the haves and the have-nots, and we've seen that even on picket lines, right? Like, why isn't the income being shared? And then maybe the UAW is a place that you wanted to talk about a little bit. How do you see it fitting into this broader sort of social, debate that's going on with haves and have-nots?
It's divisive, and we call it clickbait, you call it whatever you want, but it's intended to divide people, and for people who are otherwise having great lives to feel aggrieved. And again, I'm not suggesting, I want to make sure that people understand, I believe we need to do everything we can to ensure that people who work have living wages, that they can provide for their families, they can, take a vacation every once in a while, et cetera. So I'm absolutely in the camp of we need to ensure that people are being given, wages that allow them to work and enjoy the benefits of working. What I am saying is it is a pointless debate to get involved in, which is says, well, the CEO's pay is this, and that's 200 times yours. So what should it be? 100? Should it be 10 times? Should it be parity, dollar for dollar? I can tell you now, the best CEOs, frankly, no CEO is going to work for the average of what his or her employees work for. We are seeing, that being said, situations where the CEO will say, I will take $1 of salary or no salary at all. Give me my entire compensation in equity. If I increase the value of this company, then I should share in that increase. Even then, you're going to get tens of millions of dollars of income if the company performs well. And and the average employee is not prepared to do that. That's the other real big, it's like, okay, tell you what, you take zero as an employee. You work every day, work as hard as you do, and we'll pay you if the company succeeds. How many employees will show up then? No.
Dude, that's called also being an entrepreneur.
That's right.
Go start a company. Who's paying you? Nobody. You're betting 100% on yourself.
100%. And guess what? If you gamble big, you should win big. But it also means you could lose big. And as you know, many entrepreneurs lose their shirts and they're sitting up at night. They've mortgaged their homes. They've done this. They've done that. All this idea that the big company CEOs are fat and happy, if they hit, good. But more of them don't than do. And that's not the narrative. No one writes an article about the CEO who we reported them making $30 million because the day that we gave them their signing package, or it was valued at $30 million, but come to find out it was actually worth zero, goose egg, because it didn't work out. The company did not perform. We don't have those conversations because nobody feels sorry for the CEO who lost $30 million over 3 or 4 years. I'm not here to defend anyone. I'm saying two things can be true. CEOs, like anyone else at the top performers of their game, need to be compensated. And most of that compensation is pay for performance. If the company doesn't perform, they don't make any money. Mm-hmm. The flip side is employees we need to do everything we can to try to give employees a living wage and a competitive, uber competitive economy. Now, let me say something that I've talked with you about before, and this is the problem that we're seeing. And the notion that the company somehow doesn't want to pay its people more money. The CEO and the executives are sitting there saying, let's pay ourselves all the money, and we want to squeeze our employees. That is uncategorically, I mean, it's just not true categorically, I should say. Not, it's
Yes.
categorically untrue. The reality is we don't have a business that thrives if our employees don't feel like they're being treated reasonably fairly. So we offer competitive packages, we offer great benefits, we do those things, give them empathetic workplaces so that they feel engaged to do what they do. It's not in our best interest to squeeze employees to the point that they don't. That being said, the battle now is from the consumer. When the consumer says, I'm not willing to pay more for this product or this service, so you can give your employees a 30% increase if that's what you desire to do, but I'm not going to take on a 30% increase in that product or their service. Now we've got a problem. Houston,
Yep.
we've got a problem. The organization can't make money. So guess what? No one's going to have a job. The CEO and none of the employees will have a job at the end of the day if the customer, that consumer says, I'm over it. That person is saying, I'm already fighting $5 a gallon gas. Interest rates have doubled. People are saying now it is quite likely that we will have 8% mortgage interest rates when
Yeah, I
that was
saw that.
2.65% 2 years ago. And
Yep.
these mortgages are resetting. So people, we all get it. The consumer is at the point where they're saying, you got to slow down, put on the brakes. And in this process, employees we're trying to maintain. No, they're not keeping up with inflation, but we're trying to maintain them. Every company I know, not every, but 95% of the companies I know are giving merit increases this year, even though their customers are saying, I'm not taking any more price increases. So the money
Yep.
has to come from somewhere.
Well, okay. So first of all, on your Houston, we have a problem. For me, it's Cupertino. We have a problem. Like they're charging like so much money now for an iPhone 15 or whatever it is, and I'm
And
like,
guess what? Our people are lined up to get them. That's the irony of this, right? You're upset with what they pay Tim Cook relative to what he pays his employees, and then you line up and pay $2,000 for a phone that is the one you have in your hand is 2 years old and it still works.
nominally the same phone.
Right.
Let
So
me ask
so
you this,
like
Johnny. Do you see any um, inconsistency in the CEO making an ungodly amount of money at the same time they're laying off 12,000 employees?
so possibly. Yes, the optics are horrible, right? But let me try this. Suppose the CEO, and many of them have owned this, they overhired.
Mhm.
They during the period where the economy was on fire and employees were leaving, remember the great resignation, people were
Yeah.
dropping left and right. So for every job, you had to have two people in it so that you have built-in redundancies. We overhired. And we know that. And then many people have said it. I saw just the other day, I actually got a call from a big company CEO who said, I own this. I overhired, and the rate that we grew is not sustainable. So you've got to lay off. You just have to, and that's a correction. So I don't see that situation as a mistake. It's a mistake. You shouldn't have done it, but you've got to correct it, or you won't have a job either as the CEO. So I get it. It's a delicate balance. I know in
The
my daily practice,
optics suck. The optics
the
suck. I mean, look,
optics suck.
I
Yeah,
mean, I get
got it.
that. I get that. Look, he or she is the steward of ultimately the market cap of that company, and that's their job is to grow the market cap of the company through superior valuation of their shares. And a
Right.
huge lever that they have to pull is people costs. And so, to
That's
your
right.
point, when there was this giant land grab called talent, in the past few years, and they hoovered up too many people, and all of a sudden they're like,
And
"Oh
paid too
crap."
much.
Yeah,
And paid too
exactly.
much.
Sweetening the deal over, paying too much, etc. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, oops, don't need all these people. It still seems a little, the nicest word I can use is inconsistent that those people lost their job, but it
Right.
doesn't feel like the CEO took a comp hit along the way to say, look,
Well,
I'm
and
in
that's
this with you all.
maybe and maybe not. We've seen, first of all, many CEOs who found themselves in that position did lose their job. So let's be clear. I mean, we just talked about Rosalyn Brewer from Walgreens. She was there
Yeah.
3 years. According to what's published, over those 3 years, the stock dropped 50% in value. Guess what? She did lose her job. So yes, they laid off, and she was one of the people who was impacted as well, right? So
Mhm.
the storylines don't talk about the number of CEOs. CEO turnover is at an all-time high. So I don't think you get the news of the CEO who lost their job, but there are a ton of them losing their jobs precisely because they miscalculated. And so, but your point is a different one, and I take it. It's the optics. I totally agree with you. I remembered Salesforce had one of its biggest quarters ever, and that day announced biggest meaning successful quarters when it
Yeah.
reported its numbers to Wall Street. And that day they announced a restructuring, and people lost their jobs. Yeah, probably not the best way that I would have gone to market, right? But it happens. Consumers keep coming, and people are still lined up to go work at Salesforce. So what does that tell you? As outraged as people are, people still want to work there. And I
Speaking of
don't, again,
outrage,
that's right. I'm just saying it's an interesting situation we find ourselves in.
speaking of outraged people, I mentioned this a minute ago. We didn't get to it. The UAW strike, and one of their main things, and of course, the studies by the AFL-CIO. But is like this executive comp. They're all like that's one of their main talking points is CEO
Yes.
comp, and they want what is it, 32% or something like that, and a 4-day work
Right.
week.
Right. Oh, yeah. So let me see how that's going to work out, right? I'm going to go in and buy a Ford and pay 30% more than I paid for it last year. Let's see how many people will continue to do that, particularly when China is delivering a cheaper car and cheaper, less expensive, depends upon how you want to use the term, but maybe both. But people who can't afford that now 30% higher Ford will buy fewer of them or none of them. And then Ford will have to lay off more employees. So it's an interesting situation. It's again the consumer. Remember my point about the consumer? The consumer is going to dictate what Ford can actually pay its people.
Yeah,
That's
and I
that's
was going to go back to that point because you make it very well, which is these costs have to
yes,
come from something. They've
somewhere.
got to come from somewhere, and the most common lever pulled is price. And we're going to take our price up.
Yes,
And it's
yes,
like, okay. And then the consumer, we've talked about this before, minimum wage going up $25 or whatever in California. It's not $5 gas, it's $7 gas in California. And you just keep taking all this up. And what did we say? US workers' real wages fell by 1.6% after adjusting for inflation, guaranteed to be worse in 2023.
right,
People are going to vote with their wallet and say, yeah, no. And I guess that's the dichotomy, right? And this is
right.
probably just classic human behavior is I want what's good for me, even if it comes at the expense of you. So yeah, I want to make more money for sure. I want low prices and you know whatever happens to the other person and they're trying to get the raise in their industry, yeah, I'm not so much for that necessarily because that means my buying power is going to go down, not up.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is the issue is this is all complicated, and it's why we kind of try want to simplify compensation, and it's really, really difficult. It's nuanced. It doesn't go linearly, right? If there's such a phrase, right? It's a complicated way. And trying to explain to employees pay equity is hard, pay transparency is hard, why someone makes more than someone else. I mean, it's really, really, really
Does,
complicated. And
does this ever fit into ESG, Johnny? Just like, hey, at some point, when is enough money? You made $50 million. You couldn't spend $50 million if you tried. When is enough? And then we're just going to repurpose those funds back into the business.
well, and I'm going to be really provocative here because I don't know the answer, but I know a few of them. What do the CEOs of the unions make themselves as a percentage of what their average member makes? See, it's interesting to point to the big boogeyman CEO in corporate, but I'll tell you, for example, the former Secretary of Labor U.S. Department of Labor, Marty Walsh, left his very nice $200,000 a year job as Secretary of Labor to take a $3 million job as the head of the Players Union. Hmm. So if we're going to have the discussions, let's put all CEO pay out on the table, all of it. And he made the decision that was best for his family. I didn't see any major headlines saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe he just got a 100 times raise or whatever. He did what's in his best interest. And back to my point, he got what the market would be willing to pay someone to do what he's doing. I could justify all day that maybe that's right, maybe it's wrong. What I said was good for him. And I didn't spend time trying to figure out the average pay of a hockey league, because he went to the National Hockey League, versus what, I think it's a spin that's unnecessary. And all it does is gets people caught up. And, comparing what the head of the players union makes with the ticket taker at the National Hockey League games is a silly conversation to me.
But fair enough. Do you think there's any merit, though, in coming up with something, whether it's, absolute dollar amount or something that everybody can agree $50 million is a hell of a lot of money for anybody to make? And can you not be happy on 50 million bucks a year?
When you are prepared to say to an NFL, an NBA, a Major League Baseball player, a performer, that $50 million is enough for you too. When that conversation, when we're ready to have it, then let's have it. It's back to my point. You cannot ask superstar CEOs who account for America's economic engine, who pay a ton of taxes their organizations do by hiring people. They essentially pay those taxes, who keep this thing called a capitalistic society working, the envy of the world. The global financial markets are here, right? If you want to cap them, then cap a whole bunch of other people. Let's have that discussion. And if we're not going to have it, then again, this is one of the few times where I feel like I'm defending, but I am. I'm like, you can't at least have some integrity, some intellectual integrity in this conversation, in this debate. If not, then it's just you want to be aggrieved, and we can always point to something. I'm sure my housekeeper can say, I can't believe what Johnny makes as the homeowner versus what I make as the person who cleans his home. I'm like, so what do you want me to do? I mean, just tell me, if I make X per day, do you want something comparable to that? I mean, and I don't argue that you're not working hard. I mean, she works really hard and is a phenomenal friend. And I think we pay her reasonably. We pay her very well. But trying to compare her salary to what I make is really a specious argument at best.
That's a great word. That's what I
Right.
wanted to kind of come back to. Is this even a valid metric, or is it actually a specious one that sounds good, but it's actually, if you kind of knock on it a little bit, it's like, that doesn't even make any sense.
It's
But it sells
illogical.
headlines, and it sells picket lines. Sells headlines and picket lines. You can quote me on that one. So
Well, I love that. And I tell you, one of the things that I've been, I'm surprised, not surprised, I should be surprised, but the media hasn't. Let's go through, and I mean this, we should ask ourselves, anyone in the listening audience, go pull the salaries of the union bosses around this country. What does the
mhm.
SEI make? What do the Teamsters make? Let's go through, because if you want to talk about, and then compare that as a percentage. So that's one. But this idea of capping people's pay, that is so un-American to me. Like, I don't understand that. You should be able to, you are paid whatever the market will bear. And if
Yep.
we're willing to do that in all other aspects of media and celebrity entertainment, then you can't stop all of a sudden with corporate CEOs and say, oh, but there's a limit to which you should expect to make for your services. I just don't think that's reasonable.
I'll be interested, Johnny, in the future, if somehow this does fall under some kind of an ESG initiative, that corporate
Governance?
governance, what's best for society, and somehow it gets framed and shaped into that argument, because I can
Well,
hear somebody make.
I sit on a couple of corporate boards, and it comes up a lot from a governance standpoint. And we should assure people that when you're a member of a compensation committee, particularly of a Fortune 500 publicly traded company, you do have to justify the pay that you make to your executives. I mean, you do. And you have to go in and say, here are their peer groups, and this is what comparable CEOs are making for
Yep.
comparable sized companies, industries, et cetera. And you can't directors have been voted out of office for allowing a CEO to make, significantly more than his or her counterpart CEOs.
Yeah.
So it isn't ESG positioning. The question is, will ESG say there's a cap? It should be 210 times the average. I can tell you, I mean, you can raise it, but that's just not. I know I sound like a broken record, but it is absolutely the most disturbing, and it's a kind way to say that every year we have this debate. You make 200 times more than X, and we're just selectively doing it.
Well, I bet it sells a lot of union memberships at a minimum.
Yes.
At a minimum. And as you say, we do live in an aggrieved society, and
Yes.
it's something that definitely feeds into that narrative. Any final thoughts on executive comp? You made some really good points. Pick a different industry that you love, like sports or entertainment. It's highly leveraged compensation, right? And if you don't perform, you're out.
You're out. You're just out. And the other thing, in final, we're all sitting around talking about CEO pay. This doesn't stop at CEOs. There are some extremely well-paid other C-suite members, chief financial officer paid, chief marketing officer paid. Even department heads. I mean, there are Walmart store managers who make $200,000-$300,000 a year. I mean, right? And they have employees who are making $30,000 a year. So I mean, it's just, there's a lot, and I don't begrudge any of them. I think everyone earns what they earn, and you make decisions on what profession that you're in and what you're willing to do to earn your money and all that good stuff. The dangers associated with certain jobs I wouldn't do no matter what they paid, like boxing. I can make a ton of money as a professional boxer, but I'm not going to have him beat my brains in. But am I going to begrudge someone who does it and gets a big payout? Well, no, it's not my gift. And then even if it were, I have a choice. That's what I would say. I could do it or not. So I debate pay transparency issues a lot, and we can take that up on another conversation. I know that there are benefits to it, but I also know that the amount of work it takes to explain to people how pay really works so that the transparency doesn't lead to division and divisiveness, it takes a lot of work, and no one is willing to do it because it's not worth the clickbait.
Yep, exactly. Johnny, I told you this was going to be controversial and that I got you a little wild. But I mean, it's something that people talk about. It is in the news. It affects a lot of people that are emotional and taking, a serious, sober look at the topic. So you're in a unique position to comment on it, given your purview of, SHRM and the people that you interact with on a daily basis. So I really appreciate you, kind of providing what I felt was very balanced. You had a point of view. No, it's very balanced, and I really appreciate it. I know listeners do. And so to our listeners, if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe, comment, like. It really helps. If you happen to be listening to this on your favorite podcast platform, rate and review. But we really thank you for spending a few minutes with us today on The Workwire. Johnny, I will see you on the next episode.
See you then, my friend. Have a great week.
Check out career.club for personalized help with your job search. Visit shrm.org to become part of the largest human resources organization worldwide.